you for everyone tuning in. It's another episode of Sound On with Hollywood Hagan. Where this is, really an opportunity for me to sit down and tap in with real people doing real things, man. And I think you're doing something real, obviously. And it's been a pleasure. It's a pleasure to welcome you in today. The Chicago native, the
Yes,
influencer,
sir.
the
Yes, sir. Shy
the
Town.
the master of thriving, the host, the host of Before You Kill Yourself, TED Talk or TEDx. Also, a
I'll take that
psychology.
TED talk though. I'll take that TED talk. I'll take that
TED
upgrade. I
Talk,
mean,
TED Talk is
I'm
good.
not. I'm not gonna
It's
correct somebody who they say TED talk.
good. We're gonna stick with TED Talk. TED Talk, Leo Flowers edition. Leo Flowers,
Yeah,
man,
yeah.
pleasure. Welcome. Thank
Thanks
you
for having me, brother.
for taking the time to sit down with me, man. Very, very interesting. As far as where you're at, and obviously tapping into your background a little bit. It makes sense for me. As someone not knowing you. What you're doing right now. I guess to say the least, I'm not surprised by. So I guess just we could start off by just as far as your background goes, obviously you're from the Windy City, former D1 athlete, masters in psychology and counseling. Those are some accolades, to kind of connect the puzzles or the pieces to the puzzle a little bit. So just walk me through, you know what got you to where you're at today. For
I want to help a billion people.
mm,
I've always been a helper. I've
mhm,
always been the person that people have come to for advice and counsel. I mean, even
mhm.
from when I was a kid, I have a sister. She's 4 years younger, and my dad wasn't around, and me and my sister have separate dads, and her dad
Mhm.
lived in another part of the city. So even from a young age, I was mediating, discussions between my mom and my sister because they would go at it all the times, and my
You
friends would seek counsel from me, and so it was a role that I've always had in
sure.
terms of being a counselor and a helper, and but I've always also been very active. Playing
Mhm.
football, basketball. I was
Mhm.
an outdoor cat. I wait
Yep.
like. Some kids they got to be told to go outside, and I was like, I was already out there. I'm already running the streets. So
That's hilarious.
I so when you ask me what's gotten me here, it's that
Mhm.
passion for both. It's the passion to both help people communicate better and
Mhm.
build bridges and
Yep.
and connect people and help people, but also to remain active and realize how you show up in the world. So
Mhm.
I'm finally I'm getting to a place now where I can bridge to both the physical and mental. You know,
Okay.
um, Alexander the Great. Even with all the raping and pillaging and murdering that he did,
Mhm.
he believed that every man should have a sword in one hand and a book in the other. And to
Wow.
me, the sword was always sports. It was
Mhm.
football. That was my sword. That was
Mhm.
my the physical my fight. And but I also studied kung fu when I was little. My mom put me in kung fu class as a
Who
kid.
didn't? Who
But
didn't?
right,
To the
everybody was
local
in there with.
karate club.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh man, everybody wants to be a ninja. Everybody's
A
making. Remember
black
we used to
belt.
make those. Remember the Chinese stars you used to make with the
Oh
paper?
man.
Man, come on,
Boy,
son. We all want to throw that smoke bomb and disappear.
man. Crazy.
So going from so I always believe that every person, especially men, but you should have a sword in one hand and a book in the other. You should know how to fight. You should have a weapon, and
Mm,
and but you should know why. You should have a mission. There should be a
absolutely.
purpose and intent behind that, and you should have context for
Mhm.
why you're waging the war that you're waging, and why you want to help a billion people, and why do you have the job that you have? Why do you want to start a family? You should have
Mhm.
answers to these, or at least an intention behind it. So
Absolutely.
it's those are the things that have guided me, and those are the things that I've always wanted to instill in others, is trying to give people both a sword and a book at the
Mm.
same time. You know.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Well,
Uh,
I mean,
I
just
question, but
no, you definitely answered my question. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, playing the Dr. Phil role and being the mediator and kind of, I feel like it kind of stemmed a lot from, the background of just like the familyness of everything, right? So, which is great. And then, obviously being an athlete and being competitive and creating that sword for yourself and understanding the two and being able to differentiate those two is real, right? So, one of the things that like that I kind of make part of my own is just being real with yourself, right? So I know mental health, right? And obviously you're involved in the suicide prevention and all that. What took you from that level of being real with yourself and understanding your worth and understanding like kind of your mission, right? But then translating it into something so specific, as far as suicide prevention and taking all those things that you've learned and taking all those kind of experiences and then translating it to the suicide prevention piece.
I'd love to be able to distill it to one thing, but it
Mm-hmm.
was really a compound effect, like anything else. It's like, how
Mm-hmm.
do you bake a cake? It's like
Yeah.
you need 4, 5, 6, 8 ingredients, and it's the
Mm-hmm.
same thing that got me here.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that got me here was me, my own personal journey
Mm-hmm.
of struggling with feeling adequate, struggling with uh, feeling alone, burden to my mom and my parents and to the people
Yeah.
around me, struggling with depression and
Mm-hmm.
panic attacks and social
Mm-hmm.
anxiety and having been diagnosed with all those things and borderline schizophrenia and also seeing my friend, man, who I had a crew. It was 5 of us, and my boy Tori was the leader of the crew. And then to see him at the age of 19, this guy who was so street smart, he was the leader. He
Mm-hmm.
was the guy. Like he said, let's
Yep.
do something. We did it. And we had fun. And then to see him overcome with schizophrenia
Mm.
and to the point where has been visual and mental hallucinations. And so now
Wow.
I had to visit him. I came home from college and I visited him in a mental health institution, and
Mm.
he was all drugged up and he was a shadow of himself. He was catatonic. So to see that happened to someone at night, because you get the message when you go into sports, especially football, that
Mm-hmm.
well, don't play. You can't play sports forever. You got to protect your mind. But I've seen
Yep.
people lose their mind at a very young age. So I
Absolutely.
learned very early that even your mind can go, and it has nothing to do with
Mm.
sports or anything. It's just a draw to card. So that's
Mm-hmm.
why I talk about the book and the sword. You have to keep them both sharp and stay aware.
Mm-hmm.
So to see that, but then also, like I said, my own personal journey of as I gotten older, I found myself having these suicidal thoughts, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really have that when I was younger. It was more depression, anxiety, and I didn't take it seriously. But then
Mm-hmm.
when I heard Rashawn Salam took his life, who was a Heisman Trophy winner, got drafted by the Bears, and then at the age of 30 took his life, and
Wow.
it always scared me because he
Mm-hmm.
was the guy who had the things that I wanted.
Yeah.
And so I was like, man, if this guy took his life, man, maybe I need to take my thoughts and my
Mm-hmm.
ideations more seriously. And I called the
Mm-hmm.
800 suicide number a couple of times, and I promise you, if you thought about calling or you need to call them. They're so
Do it.
professional.
Mm-hmm.
I called them when I was at like a 9 or 10. Like they ask you to rate your suicidality on a
Wow.
scale of 1 to 10, and 10 being
The
you're
highest.
on the bridge, and I've called them when I was like an 8 or 9, and they've literally talked me down to a 0 with professional both times. Like it was just so soothing and calming. I'm so
Mm-hmm.
grateful for the 1-800 suicide.
Wow.
So I called them, and years later, the universe is fascinating. Years later, I ran into a friend of Rashawn
Mm-hmm.
Salam's, and
Wow.
this was in LA, and I said, "Yo, man, why did that guy take his life? What happened?
Yes.
And
I
or
need to
end his
know.
life?" I
I
need to
need to know.
know. I mean, it's been
Yeah.
disturbing me, man, because he was the guy who I wanted to be. And
Uh-huh.
without hesitation, he said he didn't know how to take care of himself.
Wow.
And it floored me because
Mm.
I, I had here I am with a bachelor's in psychology and a master's in counseling
Mm-hmm.
psychology, and I counseled inmates and married couples,
Mm.
and I've come from a good background. I went to a private school, and I don't think I know how to take care of myself. I don't know
Mm.
what foods I should be eating. Like for
Yeah, yeah.
me
Yeah,
personally,
yeah.
like what
Mm-hmm.
I'm still farting and gassy, so clearly I'm putting in some of the wrong things,
Yeah, yeah.
and
That's
I was
funny.
like, I don't know how much sleep I need. I don't know how to effectively, I don't know how to de-escalate situations. I'm still getting in arguments with my
Mm-hmm.
girl at the time. I don't know how to manage my emotions. I realized like I know how to do laundry. I know
That's
how to
about it.
cook. I know how to do all these external things. I
Yeah.
know the state capitals, right? I could tell you the capital of Connecticut,
Mm.
but like I was like, but how much sleep do I need? What my I didn't need. I don't know. When my back hurts, what do I do for that versus when my neck hurts? All
Mm-hmm.
these different things. How do I handle anxiety versus anger? Like what's
Mm.
the antidote for each one of those?
Yeah.
And
Let me
it
ask you this.
really made me go ahead.
Let me ask you this. How do you get educated on something like that? I mean, I feel like a lot of people are easily like, misconstrued or there's, very, very biased information out there or, people get caught up in it being so repetitive, you know what I mean? So especially with a topic like this, somebody like myself can see something, on a screen or, on a podcast or on a YouTube, and it's almost like it's so repetitive and almost regurgitated. How can you exercise the mind and train the mind and educate the mind to be knowledgeable of these things, so things like this doesn't happen, as far as was
You
it your past
can I
friend.
tell you that here's here's the foundation. Here's the
Mm-hmm.
foundation. You have to be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to be able to grow. You're not going to be able to move forward. You're not going to be able to build an empire. You're not going to be able to progress
Mm-hmm.
unless you're vulnerable. And here's what I mean, because we're all struggling with something financially, emotionally, spiritually, physically, mentally, whatever it is. And the only way that you can get help for it is if you ask for help, is if you let somebody know that it's an issue for you. So many
Mm-hmm.
people are struggling with shame and guilt, or they can't pay, they don't have money for rent, and they're afraid
Yeah.
to ask for money. And so
Mm-hmm.
unless you have the courage and the
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability to ask, it's the same thing. Courage and
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability are the same thing. You can't display courage without vulnerability. Then
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to talk to people. So you have to
Mm-hmm.
be vulnerable. That's number one. Number
Mm-hmm.
two is you have to seek your answers from multiple sources.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what I mean. Let me talk about just food and nutrition right now, right? I'm
Yes,
44,
please. Let's do it.
and my goal is, I talked about, like, I want to help 1 billion people, but I
Mm-hmm.
also want to live to be 100, right? That's my goal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where am I getting my information from? One,
Mm-hmm.
I have to go inside. That's why I
Mm-hmm.
had to learn my blood type. I realized, like, there's science that shows that the diet that's best for you is based on partially based on your blood type. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know my blood type. If you go to Asia, everybody knows their blood type.
They know their
They
blood
higher,
type,
right? Yeah.
nutrition levels, cholesterol levels. Like we're
Yo,
blind to
they
that. So it's
all
like,
based on blood type. They like they're women. I've talked to Japanese women, like, I don't mess with blood type A's or blood type
wow,
O's or whatever.
wow.
And so your blood type is, they hire you. There are companies that hire you for certain positions based on your blood type. So like I said, like there's science and research that links to that. But I'm not gonna stop there, because that's only one part of your nutritional puzzle. So I looked at that to help me hone in my nutrition. And then I looked at the external. I looked at my family. I'm like, I have people in my family who live to be 90 with
Mm-hmm.
no glasses, no cataracts, no
Mm-hmm.
major health issues. So then I started asking questions about how did they live their life, right? Because they got to 90. So it'd be foolish of me not to study the people in my family who share my same ancestry, right? From Belize, and my dad is from and the people on my mom's side, they made it to 90 primarily on a plant-based diet. And so plant-based diet is not like how Americans think of it, like Brussels sprouts and kale. It was more like beans and rice and plantain and potatoes.
Stuff
Very
that comes from the
hearty,
roots.
healthy food. Come from the roots, right? And they only ate meat once a week because that's all they could afford. So when you look at an American diet, it's eat meat every day, like meat and potatoes. It should be beans, rice, and potatoes, and then occasionally some meat. Now,
going back, so with that point made, going back on my last question, this is also one of those things where, you know, I feel like a lot of people are being misguided, and the information is very repetitive, and, you know, it's tough for people. I mean, for myself, I mean, you know, self-education, and like, you know, that's always been big on me, right? And finding out different avenues and true avenues that reflect, you know, kind of my beliefs and everything like that. But, you know, there's so many people in this world that are so driven by, you know, the social medias or like the, you know, things like that. And it's like, me being a consumer of that, I've seen, you know, repetitive information of what of like, for your example, what a plant-based diet is, right? You know what I mean? And you know, I think it's really tough on people, you know, finding that true meaning of sustaining that health or that plant-based, you know, that diet. So I guess, you know, dive a little bit deeper on, you know, really getting educated on that piece, and really trying to come to an understanding of, you know, I think everything that you mentioned as far as, you know, knowing your blood type, your interest, your background, you know, and your family, and everything stems from that, right? Which is great. What are some other things that you can do from an educational piece to make sure that you know you're on the right path?
Great question, man. And so here's the third piece. So we've already covered genetics, looking at your genetics, get your blood sample, find out if you're deficient in anything, and what you need to ramp up or supplement, right?
Which is great.
And then
I need to do that.
And then the second thing is, like we mentioned, is your family history. Is, you know, like I said, I talked to my grandparents. So look at your family history so that you're aware of what's happening. And then the third part is traveling. Now, why traveling is so big for me, well, I want to change this to full screen. Is because I just got back from Peru, right? Have you been in Peru?
Never. But I heard I heard the story. I heard the story. It was actually on your latest podcast, right?
Yeah. So I just get back from Peru, and there, you know, they subscribe to a mostly plant-based diet also of is potatoes, corn, quinoa. Those are the foundational foods. And these people live for a long time. The women, their hair doesn't gray until they're 70 or 80, right? They live, I mean, I was looking at my girl and I was like, I haven't seen gray hair anywhere.
What's
we
going
were
on?
around by the elders up in it. And then she was like, yeah, I noticed the same thing. And you know, we're talking about the food and the life. And so the reason why I say travel is, can I curse on this?
You're free. You're free.
Okay. All right. So we go up there, and I'm noticing that, like, me and my girl, we getting it in better than usual. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm laying it down, and I was like, you know, my ego was like, it's all me, but I was like, no, there's something else going on here. You know. Yeah, it's something in the water. It's something
in the air.
Yeah.
Water.
Yeah. My ego wants to take all the credit for it, but I was like, nah, man, there's something else that's happening. So I find out two things. One is at high altitudes, it's called HAPE. HAPE.
Okay.
So high altitude pulmonary edema. So a lot of people who climb Mount Everest
Mm,
experience erections. A lot of men
wow,
as they're climbing from the high altitudes. And
that's crazy.
so I was having the same thing in Peru climbing because we're at 14,000 feet. And man, I'm telling you, the
Wow.
pipe was, I mean, I was laying it down, homie. I can't tell you. So, but you go, what's this
Yeah,
got to do with the nutrition part, right? So
yeah.
we up there, and then like they're telling us stories about the Incans and how
Mhm.
the Incans used to carry people up the mountains on their back,
Wow.
like royalty and stuff. And I was like,
Yeah,
hold on, son. I did a couple times, but to carry somebody numerous times up and down on your back, and then you think about the
so,
Sherpas. That's a whole nother level. So the other
mhm.
part is the quinoa and the potatoes. I'm not talking Idaho potatoes, those big ass potatoes that you get when you go to a steakhouse filled with
Those
butter
Yukon,
and
Yukon,
cottage
the
cheese and
Yukons.
chives. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the tiny potatoes because the
Mhm.
small potatoes, those are
Mhm.
the organic potatoes. Those
Yep.
are the ones that are nutrient dense. The big
Mhm.
ones, those are trash. It's fast
Mhm.
food potatoes. You're not getting nothing with those.
Nope.
So
Nope.
so I'm looking at the potatoes. So now I'm eating potatoes like I never ate before. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
I was looking at the quinoa. I never, quinoa is a new thing, and I was like,
Man,
oh, this is just some new trendy.
that's my jazz.
The quinoa,
Man, I've been on
yeah,
quinoa probably the last 10 years.
yo. So then I
Yeah,
started looking at the nutritional information on quinoa,
it's
and
amazing.
quinoa is one of the only foods that has is a complete protein. It
Mm-hmm.
stands by the other. But with quinoa, it's
Mm-hmm.
all in one. It's high in calcium. It has
Mm.
iron. It has all your things in there. So I was
Yeah,
like, you
yeah.
put the quinoa together with your potatoes, you're a beast. So me and
Oh
my
yeah.
girl, we get back, and let me tell you, son, I'm
That's
still
all
laying it.
you
I'm
eat.
still laying it
That's
down.
that's
I'm
what that's what you was eating on the way
yo.
in.
So
Mhm.
and I told my girl, I was like, listen, I'm gonna tell you, like the way the way the blood is circulating now.
Yeah.
This is a
It,
nutritional
no,
difference right now. And I mean some lifestyle changes also. Like I'm working out and meditating more every morning, for 20 minutes, and I think part of us being in this coronavirus, like because I'm not traveling as much, I'm not stressed out as much trying to
yeah.
get from A to B. So there are some lifestyle changes that I can't separate. But I'm telling you that when I just underestimated and when I say quinoa, you got to get the real stuff because there's
Yeah.
some junk food quinoa out there, or not junk food, but just not as nutritionally dense
Hmm.
as other
Have you
quinoa. So
have
you want to
have
get
you
that.
have you tried the tricolor?
So I brought back the Peruvian quinoa, and we
Oh,
got the
okay.
tricolor quinoa, and
Okay.
now I'm trying to get up on
Oh,
Peruvian
corn.
corn, that purple corn. Yo,
Oh
yeah,
man.
that purple corn
Man,
is
I've
is
seen it. I've seen it,
everything.
but you
Yo,
can't find it. You can't
yo,
find. I
you can
can't.
order it. You can order it off Amazon. And I'm sure there's a Peruvian. I don't want to really go that route, but
Yeah.
right now, man, that's the best I can do. So yeah, you can if you get that purple
It's
corn
good
because
enough.
they got 2,000 varieties of corn in Peru. So
My
so
goodness.
the our access to food. So the thing is, even if you want to eat healthy, it's a
Hmm.
challenge here in America because even the healthy foods have been stripped of their nutritional value just to
There's too
mass
much
market it, you know.
stigmas. There's too much stigmas on what's good.
Yeah.
It's like what's
Yeah.
really good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just it's so saturated with things that people think is good, and it's just like you're just spinning your wheels. You
Well,
know?
just like the kombucha, right? Like kombucha is,
Mhm.
is a very good thing because of all the uh god damn it, it's escaping
The
me right
vitamins,
now.
and
The
minerals, and
bacteria and and all that stuff. But
yeah.
the way kombucha's been marketed,
Mhm.
this commercial kombucha that's on the shelves,
Mhm.
that's trash.
Oh
So
yeah.
you have
Don't touch it.
to, it's unfortunate because people don't really have the time to put
Mhm.
into really exploring. And if you got kids and a wife and you got Like,
Yeah.
it's hard for
Uh,
you to take the time to figure it out. So you're doing your
Stuff.
best, you know.
Absolutely.
But that's why we do the podcast that we do,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
this is an easy way for
Educate.
people to get the information, yeah, and educate them.
Educate.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's great.
So
Yes, I like
traveling, man,
the
asking the
traveling
question.
piece is very, very interesting. I didn't even, especially just, when you travel interstate and you go state to state, I mean, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be kind of the same thing, right? But the second you go outside of like the country, is
Right.
where you see the biggest change, right? And you
Yep.
you kind of notice the lifestyle, like you mentioned, the lifestyle piece, man. That's one of the biggest things, man, when it comes to, getting right, getting healthy, and understanding the mental side of it, and kind of furthering your education beyond the means of the typical everyday, you know, idea of it. And then traveling, I didn't even think about it like that, but I mean, that's an amazing point, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. When I travel and I go places, my thing is when I see someone who's above me, right, in whatever sphere, whether it's financially, emotionally, spiritually, physically, I ask them questions. I want to know how they got there. I don't care
Absolutely.
if you're 10 years older, 20 years younger. That stood out to me in Peru also is how happy they were and how connected they were, but how little they did in their day. Like, I'm trying to do a million things with my day. You know, I'm uploading on social media.
Uh-huh.
I'm spending time with my girl. I'm
Yep.
cooking. I'm reading. I'm practicing guitar. I'm taking sign language. Like, I'm doing a million things, and you talk to them, they're doing like a few things, and
Yeah.
that's good. Like, and they only
Yeah.
eat a few things. They don't have this buffet of food. They eat the same foods over and over. They keep it
Yeah.
simple, man. But
Consistent,
but yeah, it's consistency and simplicity, and they
bro.
whittle it down to what's nutritionally dense, you know, and they're off and running, man. They're off and
Mm-hmm.
running. So
That's
you have to continually ask questions. You see somebody who's been married 50 years, ask
hmm
them what the biggest obstacles were around, and hey, man, what's your outlook on life? Like, you just have
hmm
to ask people questions, but then you also have to. So then what I do is the same thing I did with Peru is, they're talking about the quinoa and the potatoes, but then I
hmm
also do the research. I Google it. What is
Yeah.
in quinoa? Why
hmm
is it like that? I get the science behind it,
hmm
because a lot of people are doing things and they don't realize there's a
Man.
science to it. So
So
you
that's
need the
that's
sword and you need the book, son.
that's
You
so
can't
crazy.
walk
That's
this
so,
earth
bro.
without it.
You are literally speaking to me right now. Cause like, I mean, for me, it's for me, it's huge. Like like that self education and furthering your education, right? And truly being knowledgeable on things, right? So like, why do you think people lack in that so much? Like,
Because
why is
people
it
are
that they
trying
can't
to
take the
it,
extra mile to really
I,
figure it out?
here's the here's the thing
Yeah.
is do one thing at a time. And so here's an example, right? So right now I'm at a place where I'm thinking about my nutrition and honing it in and the quinoa and stuff like that, right? So right now my focus is finances, right? So I asked this dude, he's a hedge fund, makes a lot of money. And
Mm-hmm.
I go, and I remember when I had maybe $100 in my checking account,
Yeah, yeah.
and he was like, put away the same amount every month until you
Mm-hmm.
get to 10 grand. And then
Mm-hmm.
I did that. And then I got to 10 grand. Right.
Yeah.
And then I asked somebody else. Once I got to 10 grand, I asked somebody else advice. And he was like, all right, well, come talk to me once you saved 100 grand.
Mm.
Right. And he said, when you get to 100 grand, then we'll talk about real estate. So
Mm-hmm.
I bring that up to say baby steps. Just like,
Yep.
remember in math, how you would try to skip steps
Yeah,
to
yeah.
do division or whatever, and the teacher be like, no, you have to do this step before that step. You'd be like, yeah, but I got it. And she'd be like, no. The
Mm-hmm.
reason why she wanted you to do the steps is
Mm-hmm.
because then if there was a mistake, she knew where you made it. If
Absolutely.
you skip a step and then things fall apart, it's hard for you to figure out what
Yeah.
mistake you made. So I
Wow.
go,
It's a
okay,
crazy analogy.
asked one guy how to get to 10 grand. I got to 10 grand. Now, what it
Mm-hmm.
takes to get from 10 grand to 100 grand, a different set of skills, right? So then he
Yep.
was like, set up this account, do this, and boom. So I'm doing that right now, building a portfolio up to that amount. And then he said, come back and talk to me once you get there. So then that's what it's about, asking yourself, what is the next? And then following through until that's completed. Everybody trying to read the whole book. When you read a self-help book, the point of view is not to finish the book. The point of view is to figure out what chapter you need to be on, master that chapter, and then move to the next chapter. But people like bragging about finishing a book. That's not your job. That's not your intention. It's to get the information extrapolated, put it into use, and then come back to the book. So it should take you years to finish a book, not a weekend to finish a book. That is at least talking about a self-help book, right?
Yeah. Yep. I feel like, so just overindulging on the book and the content and so, not really making it a sponge. Yeah.
So right now, people are listening in and they've learned something right now already. They're like, oh man, that's powerful. I need to start doing that. Well, cut off the episode. I'm not trying to lower you, but to pause the episode and then go in, because if you listen to the end, then you'll have lost the motivation by then. Right now, you're excited, you're ignited, you're activated to take a movement towards your nutrition, towards your health. Right now, you want to call your family member, you want to travel somewhere, so go do that. And then once you've done that, then listen to the rest of the episode to figure out
come back to it.
Don't be trying to you're trying to get it all right now. You greedy, selfish. That's the problem.
I mean, bro, you're really touching every point and everybody's way of thinking. You're spot on. I mean, I can even say that I'm a victim of it. You know what I mean? I can be vulnerable enough to say that I've been a victim of it. But I'm obviously trying to take those steps where I can make sure that I'm not a victim of it again, right? So like, I mean, it's just the fact of like, really understanding the process, I think is huge, right? So I mean, how can you answer this for me? How can you go about being consistent on that? And then how do you go about coming back to that source and repeating that process, if that makes sense to you?
Okay. So I'm gonna backtrack a little bit and then come back to that question.
Okay.
When we're talking about nutrition and getting the information, there's a fourth part that, and I learned this from my boy Mike G, who I had on my podcast, is you, even when you know the answer, ask as if you don't.
Okay.
So when I'm in a room, right? Like right now we're talking about nutrition and longevity and mental health and whoop-de-whoop. I go in and with the mentality that I know nothing. And so I ask them everything. I go, hey, how long should I sleep? Hey, what are the right foods to eat? What's good for my blood sugar? How do I manage emotions? How do I manage sadness? How do I manage anger? I don't know. And I go in like I'm a 9-year-old and I want to learn things over and over again, because what'll happen is it'll start to reinforce some of the beliefs that you already have and validate them. And then two, you'll hear the information that you kind of know, but in a different way that makes more sense to you. Like people will say eat healthy, but if I phrase it to you in a story form, or like I forgot what analogy I used earlier, where you're like, yo, like when you put it like that.
Oh,
like
it was you had so many. I know you had the math equation and skipping a step.
Yeah, like the math equation. So then that stands out to you, and you go, "Oh, that's a great way to put it. I never thought of it like that." Because what happens is like the way we think about things, and sometimes like it's not strong enough to get us to the next level. So then we hear something, we go, "Oh, I could take that with me." Like now that's reignited my belief in what I do, because you could lose your way, as
absolutely.
That's why we have maps. So to continue to ask questions that you know the answer to, or that you think you know the answer to, just in case you could be wrong.
So what you're saying is, don't settle with your own belief. Don't
settle with your own belief. That's why they have. Remember when you were in college, you had the first edition, second edition, third edition.
Yeah.
They have a book called the DSM, which is the mental health book. It's a diagnostic statistical manual, and
Hmm.
they every couple years they come out with a new edition. Why? Because they're absorbing new information and they're flexible to things and
Hmm.
ideas changing, and they're also realizing that mental health looks different as
Hmm.
the social landscape changes, right? And
So
so
so so
you
really
as a person,
really understanding that everything has an expansion.
absolutely, you update your phone. You have to update your way of thinking and the way you process things and your strategies and tactics. You have to continually study what's happening out there, right? How do you become consistent? Is
Hmm.
you the best way? I just had this conversation with someone earlier about how to be consistent, and the way that I found is you. I had a buddy ask me, man, what? I forgot what he asked me, but anyway, it came down to: are you a missionary or a mercenary? Meaning,
Hmm.
are you doing things out of principle, or are you doing
Hmm.
things for the money, or for the bling, or for the fame? And so, when you're doing things as a mercenary for the money,
Hmm.
for the bling, like you're easily encourageable. I could easily shift you and change
Yeah.
you and sway
Because
you, you know.
because you have a typical way of thinking.
Absolutely. But
Yeah.
when you're a missionary, when you're somebody rooted, it goes back to fruits, to the foods, right? We
Mhm.
talk things that are root foods and from the
Yeah.
ground. They're nutritionally dense. So
Mm-hmm.
when your values are
Mm-hmm.
rooted in a mission, you think about
Mm-hmm.
Martin Luther King. What else would
Oh
make
man.
someone walk as far as he did and be away from his family and be taunted and have his life threatened more than a mission? Money doesn't make you do
Mission.
that. A
No.
mission does that. Why else would people walk over hot coals? Why else would
Mm-hmm.
a mom lift the car off her baby? You know,
Mm-hmm.
these are things that people do for money. It's rooted in a mission. Why does somebody sacrifice their life, go to
Yeah.
war for a country, right? It's rooted in mission. And
Mm-hmm.
if you haven't figured out what your mission is, what you
Mm-hmm.
value,
Yep.
then you're gonna struggle with everything. And so,
Yep.
me, one of the things is I want a sense of mobility to feel free to be wherever I am. That's why I started the
Yeah.
podcast. One of the reasons
Absolutely.
because it allows me to do it from anywhere, right? It gives me
Mm-hmm.
mobility. It's one of the reasons why I changed the way I work out. I
Yeah.
went from like just bench pressing to yoga, doing
Calisthenics.
dynamic or calisthenics. It gives me more mobility. So when I
Mm-hmm.
think about food, I think about foods that are high in fiber because they move
Mm-hmm.
through my body quickly. So once again, so everything
It's
that I'm
amazing.
doing, when I even my girlfriend, right? When we started talking, I filter her through my mission, my value
Mm-hmm.
of mobility. Of, is she someone who can move with me? Is she someone
Yeah.
who can travel with me? And she
Mm-hmm.
is. So you have to root yourself in a. That's why like Nike has just do it. That's
Mm-hmm. Tagline.
their whole thing is serving as many
Yeah.
people as they want. So we think this is something reserved only for athletes or for
Yeah.
companies, but you as a person need to have a mission statement, a purpose, a
Mm.
crest. There's so many families that have that crest to
Yeah.
remind you of what the family is about. You know, they have the armor and there's four things usually
Yeah.
in there and a sword and all these different things going
A
through. And
shield
if you
and
don't have a family crest, then you create one and you make it and you put it up on a wall. That's why people make a vision board every year. I don't have to make a vision board.
no,
I
absolutely
figure
not.
out what my root thing is, and then everything is rooted through there. So I don't need to with my values. So
Yeah.
and it takes time. It's
Yeah.
not a thing that's easy. It doesn't come to you overnight. Like you really
Yeah.
have to sit down and come back to it a few times.
Hmm. Man, that's deep, man. Because I could say I've been practicing that myself, man. Honestly, I mean, the vulnerability part, right, and being real with yourself and understanding your worth, obviously, but at the same time, exercising and practicing that, right? Because, like you said, it's not an overnight, it's not an overnight thing. So, like, I think that's the toughest part for people is trying to understand, like, we live in a world where it's right now, right? I need it right now. Why, like, out, like, overnight, mindsets. And it's just like, I think that's the biggest struggle with people, is that finding that consistency comes with you being vulnerable with yourself, and kind of being real with yourself and dumbing things down a little bit. So, I mean, those are some key points of the consistency part of it, because
Yeah.
people fall off just as quick as they start.
Well, I think, well, part of the challenge is that word exercise. I think that how we phrase things, I think it freezes people, it stagnates them, because
Mhm.
going back to Peru, and my mom's from Belize, so I saw similar things. Is people didn't exercise in Belize. My great grandmother, who lived to be 90, she didn't exercise, and the Peruvians don't exercise, but they are active. And I
Yeah.
think if you ground it, like, the question is, how do you phrase it in a way that activates you? Because
Hmm.
for some people, they love to exercise. They'll be like, "Yeah, I'm
Hmm.
gonna go exercise."
Yeah.
Some people, that word makes them cringe. It
Yeah.
stifles them,
Hmm.
scares them.
Yeah. 100%.
Maybe
100%.
exercise is the word. Maybe it's about being active. For some people, it
Hmm.
might be about working out. Like, yeah, let's go work out.
Yeah.
People like a
Yeah.
good workout. Maybe it's about hitting
That
the gym.
that that
Maybe it's
that
about
yeah.
playing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Let's go play.
Let's
So
go hoop.
it's like, how do you phrase it? Remember, like, when you had a kid and you want the kid to do something, you had to
Hmm.
figure out how to say it to the kid, to
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
them to eat it, to get them to go there, to get them to go to sleep. So you have to do the same thing with yourself. Is, how can I phrase this in a way
Mhm.
that gets the juices going, that actually excites me to want to do it, and to make me want to stay consistent with it,
Yep.
right? Is it more about playing for me? Is it more about exercise? Is it more about working out? Is it more
Hmm.
about the group dynamic? Sometimes, like, a lot of
Hmm.
people bought that Peloton bike, and
Yeah.
yeah, the Peloton is a great bike for you to work out on, and you'll burn a lot of calories. But what you're missing out on is being outdoors on a
Yeah.
bike.
It's different. It's
And if you
different,
like the
man.
Soul Cycle, that group aspect, yeah, you feel the
Man, it's
wind,
different.
you're seeing
Yeah.
people, you
Yeah.
get to learn your neighborhood, you're waving at people, you get
Mm.
to stop at places and visit, and the time, it goes by so much
It's
easier.
a
You get
great
to
it's a great
explore.
it's a great way to meditate as well, too.
It's a
Man.
amazing way to
Woo.
meditate.
Get on that bike.
Absolutely.
You on that thing for about an hour, hour and a half. Next thing you know, you didn't cycled all kind of mental exercises, man.
Yeah,
Not only is it
absolutely.
physical, it's a mental. Like, that's another thing too, man. What are some ways where people can exercise mentally, man? Like, because I mean, meditating, obviously, you know, really talking out loud to yourself, you know what I mean? I think is big. Um, Obviously, consuming what you consume, what you're listening to, what you're reading, right? But what are some key ways? I mean, this is definitely a question I'd like to know, because I want to expand some of my mental exercises, and I think this
Yeah.
is key for a lot of listeners that wonder, what do I have to do? So I guess that's the question: what do you have to do to exercise mentally, from a mental health standpoint?
Man, that's a great question. So,
Hmm.
man, there's so many things to do. So, I'm gonna start with something that we all do and love to do, and that's watch television, right?
Hmm.
So, especially now, a lot of people are binge watching Netflix and
Yeah,
Amazon, and
yeah.
Ozark just started today, so I'm gonna definitely get
Yeah,
my
yeah,
Ozark
yeah.
fixing. But
Yes,
so,
sir.
one of the ways that I watch television is I watch an episode, and
Mhm.
then I have a conversation with my girl about it. I ask her, I go, what were your takeaways from that? Who did you
Mhm.
resonate more with?
Mhm.
What was the purpose of watching TV is not just to escape and lose yourself, but it's
Mhm.
also an opportunity for you to explore more about each other and find out more about yourself,
Sure.
and ask deeper questions, because
Mhm.
these TV shows, they they have these extreme situations, and you sit
Hmm.
there and you ponder what would I
They
do,
they
but
leave you they leave
we
you guessing
they
and wondering.
they leave you guessing and wondering, and but
Hmm.
we go through the episodes so quickly we never take time to question and ask and see
Abs-
and check in with ourselves and see how we actually really felt about that death, because we moved on to episode 2 and we don't realize we were kind of grieving, and so
mhm.
what does that say? And I think she should have shot him, or I think they should have took the, like, and then
That's
what,
funny.
like, what is that saying? So
Yeah.
to take that as an opportunity to find
Mhm.
out more about yourself and more about the person that you're with, because I promise you, you're gonna find out things that you didn't even know. And then the other way I process the TV is I like to read a review of the episode. Vulture has
Mhm.
really good write-ups about the episode, and not just was it thumbs up or thumbs down, but
Yeah.
it gives you like really deep insights as to the behavior and what's going on, and
Sure.
and ways to ponder it. And so like I'll read that and then I'll be like,
Sure.
whoa, I didn't even think about it like that. And I'll sit on that
Man.
for a minute. So it's an opportunity for you to exercise
That's
your,
that's
because
that's
and
that's funny that you actually brought that point up because the movie what is it Us, right? The Jordan Peele Us. So they actually, so the movie runs right, and it's one of those movies that keeps you guessing, that has you on your toes, wondering why that happened or what this happened. You know what I mean? They literally have a whole review piece on depicting out the entire movie and connecting it from even the last movie that he made, which was Get Out, right? And how those two coincided with each other and how it's one big. So like, yeah, that is like that just kind of reminded me of that piece and how important that is, because I mean, really understanding it and stopping and thinking for a second.
yeah,
Yeah, that
yeah,
exercise
because
piece is
we're
very
just
unique.
we're just dumping it all in,
Hmm.
and you just don't realize how it affects you, and how
Hmm.
you look at the world. I remember when I binge watched The Walking Dead.
Hmm.
It,
Great show.
you start seeing the world is like a zombie could pop out at any time, or like
You gotta
it it
always be
it it,
ready.
it yeah, and that's not how I want to walk the earth. So
Oh,
you have to ask yourself, like, how is this changing how I show up for my family, for my friends, for my job, to my, there's a comic, Joe Rogan talked about how
mhm.
he watched a documentary, and it was a sad about some kids, something something whatever, right before he did a show, and he said it was a horrible show because he
Yep.
was all caught up in his feelings.
Man,
So but so that's one way of
controlling what you consume.
control what you consume, but also to process it.
Oh,
If it's not
yes,
about
yes, sir.
control, but to
Yes, sir.
take time to process it and
Yes,
see
sir.
what's going on in there. And
Yeah.
same thing with music. You
Man.
you listen to something, you hear something that makes you feel a certain way. You're like, hold on, is this? Going back, I always go back to Peru because I just got back from there, and it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
just so many insights from that. But I'm a huge Jay-Z fan,
Dang.
massive Jay-Z
Risen.
fan, and from Reasonable Doubt on up.
Yes,
And
sir.
he just dropped his new one with Jay Electronica.
Yep.
It's a album, and he's
It's
like
a
on five or six of the verses,
dope,
right?
dope album. He's at yeah,
So
he's featured on it. His name ain't even on the
ain't
track.
even on there, right?
He just pop up on
So I'm in Peru, and we on a bus on a mountainside, and it's like a 2 hour van ride to where we're going. And I go,
you.
yo, this is a nice time for me to put on the headphones and check out this new album. And as we're riding through the countryside, and I'm seeing people live in huts and planting
Mhm.
tomatoes, and people coming together to help out their neighbors, and then I hear Jay-Z talking about money and all these aspirational things. I
Mhm.
couldn't listen to it. I had to cut it off after
It
like
didn't
a
make sense.
song. It didn't match what I
Match,
was
yeah, Matt,
witnessing,
yeah,
what I
make
was
sense.
seeing.
Yeah,
There was a
yeah.
disconnect.
It was
It was
clash.
incongruent. I'm like, yeah, it was a clash. I'm like, these people, they have going back to a purpose and a mission. They had a thing called Ayni. It's Ayni, and it
Okay.
means reciprocity. And literally all the villagers had their own piece of land. And anytime somebody on a piece of land needed help, the other villagers would come together and help them on a piece of land. And then when you needed help, because you helped me, now I'm going to help you. And it's called Aini, it's reciprocity. But,
Man, I wish we lived in that world.
Jay-Z, when you listen to rap, they're not really talking about collaboration. They're not really talking
Nah,
about cooperation or reciprocity.
man.
On and I got to get mine, and don't trust nobody, don't get your money from your hunt, like all these messages. And I'm like, it's not. I'm not seeing that, son.
It's not
These are
resonating.
lies. It's not resonating. And yeah,
Mhm.
that might be true, and it might be necessary. Like if you in jail, I understand.
Yeah.
Like there's certain rules of the law in jail, and
Yeah.
if you in a hood, there's certain
Yeah.
rules there. But I was like, I can't listen to this and experience this at the same time. It doesn't work. So
Yeah.
I forgot why I brought that up, but it's just about being aware of what you're consuming,
Yeah.
and
That's
and being able to
it.
process it in terms of but to get more specific. But the way I journal is I will freestyle write with my dominant hand, right? I'm left-handed, so I'll freestyle write with that hand, and
Okay.
then I'll freestyle write with my non-dominant hand,
Uh-huh.
because your dominant hand is who you are now. Your non-dominant hand is who you are when you're about 9. That's like where
Mm.
you're stuck emotionally. And so
Mm-hmm.
you'll notice an immediate change in tone and voice, and the way you're talking to yourself and communicating
Interesting.
and
Wow.
processing emotions. And so that's a way to work both sides of the brain,
Mm-hmm.
and make sure that they're both activated.
Uh-huh.
Similarly, in personal training, one of the things is, people always focus on strength, like how many
Mm-hmm.
push-ups can I do, how many squats, how far can I run. But as a
Mm-hmm.
personal trainer, the number one thing that we look for, having an imbalance,
Mm-hmm.
then you are in trouble. I don't care how strong you are.
Yeah.
That strength is going to be a liability if you have
Yes,
an
sir.
imbalance. So I'd
Yes,
rather
sir.
have you have the same imbalance on both sides than to be really strong and flexible on your left side and
Mm-hmm.
then really stiff and weak on your right side, right?
Mm-hmm.
So same thing with your brain, is that you have to make sure you're training both sides of your brain. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why I like learning a language or playing an instrument, because when you play an instrument, you have to
Man,
use both hands. You're
we're not
forced to
doing
use
enough.
both hands, right?
We're not doing enough, man.
Congo, guitar, you study a language that
Mm-hmm.
forces all your the different synapses and neurons to start firing and shooting at different levels. And then I'd encourage you that what it also does is Spanish people are very passionate, and they talk with their
Absolutely.
hands, and they have a way of speaking that
Yes.
if you
Mm-hmm.
start to learn that language, you'll find yourself emoting more, and being more
Mm-hmm.
emotional, and being more vulnerable. Where you have the Germans who they have little to no sense of humor.
Yeah.
Not to stereotype, but even
But
Germans will tell you that. So you'll
real.
recognize that how your language and your vocabulary is limiting how
Mhm.
you're expressing yourself. So when
Absolutely.
you study other languages, it expands other things for you, and how you see the world.
That's amazing. It's crazy that you're speaking on these things, and like I'm literally living these things, right? Like, I play instruments, I do production, so I get involved with that. I exercise on that, and I just do different things, and I just try to exercise and get out my comfort zone. I think that's one of the biggest things, is that a lot of people, they want to do what they're good at, right? Or mentioning that you're writing with your left hand, or you write dominant with your right, and obviously you don't use that left. But the second you use it, it's out of your comfort zone, right? And what's great, rest in peace, Kobe Bryant, but he actually went through a phase where he actually broke his hand, his right hand, and obviously that's his dominant hand, right? And he's out, he can't play, so he's like, oh, I'm not just gonna sit on the couch. I'm showing up to practice. I'm showing up to shoot arounds, and I'm doing everything with my left hand. This man learned how to shoot free throws, shoot the mid range, shoot the 3 point, everything, walking around with a cast, and he's only operating with his left hand. And I just thought that was just like, obviously it's the Mamba mentality, right? And a lot of things that, stem from that term are derivative on what he did and what he stood by. And I think that's an amazing piece, and it touched me, right here, because I live that, right? And I asked myself, like, I feel like I'm an abstract. I think at like at an abstract level, right? I think, right, kind of outside the box. I'm a man that likes to challenge myself. You know what I mean? And I feel the growth mentally. I feel the growth by attacking different things, doing different things, getting involved with the podcast, kind of just like getting involved in things that aren't necessarily that I'm used to. And I think, that's what's helped me get to this mental state where I'm at now at such a young age. And I'm trying to figure out ways how I can help my friends and family, to kind of push, some of the same exercise and the same experiences that I'm going through to help me to get me to where I'm at now. So definitely.
And you know what? I'll say this,
man.
like
Amazing.
I'll tell you right now, you don't have to push anything, because here's the thing. I was vegan for 3 years, right? And I remember when I went vegan, and this was as it was starting to become popular, but before it was a thing.
A true thing.
Yeah. And I had so many people clown me for it, man. A lot of my boys, even girls, would be like eating rabbit food.
Yep.
Like I took a lot of verbal abuse over being vegan, right? A lot of hate. And
I believe it.
And not because of what people were saying, but it just didn't feel right for my body anymore. So many of those same people were like, yo, man, I was really looking up to you and so proud of you for being vegan. And they were hurt and they were disappointed that I had stopped being vegan. And these are the same people who were clowning me. But the whole time they was talking trash and this and that. And quietly, I found out that, like, as a result, my sister went vegan, my other sister went vegan. Like, you had this profound influence on people without having to tell them. And so even when I was vegan, and that was my intent as a vegan, was to say, I'm not going to tell anybody to be vegan. I'm just going to tell them that I'm vegan. And then they'll, just by looking at my lifestyle,
they'll understand.
They'll understand, right? Because it's just like, when you see us, that's why they have celebrity endorsements, because they go, I know if Brad Pitt or Michael Jordan or whoever is wearing this or spraying that or driving this, then people are going to do it. They're like, I want to be like them. So in your head, you have to already realize that you are that celebrity endorser. And so people are already watching you and they're studying you. And when people are talking trash to you, what they're really doing is they're testing to see if you're a missionary or mercenary. Is this something that you're really about? Are you really about that life? Because, like, when you join a gang, like, you can't just join a gang. Like, they go, all right, now we got to find out if you're really about that life, son. Initiation. And so there's an initiation, and that initiation is, you might have to lose some friends, you might have to lose some families. Maybe people don't invite you to the cookouts. Maybe people trash talk you. Your girlfriend breaks up with you. But if you can weather that storm, if you can go through that turbulence, right? Then you're gonna find it at a certain altitude. This goes back to a hike in Peru. At a certain altitude, man, you will be erect. You will resurrect. You understand what I'm saying? I tried to make that much more clever than it.
I hear you though. I hear you. You got to get to the top of the mountain. You get to the top of the mountain, we are good.
I was trying to be much more profound than.
I hear you, brother. Don't worry. I totally understand.
But somebody broke it down to me the other day. Man, I had him on my podcast. I forget who said it, but he said, if you look at the Bible has more stories about people who have and things that have died and then resurrected only to come back stronger. Whether you're talking about Jesus, whether you're talking about empires, whether you're talking about countries to come back stronger. So sometimes the way you think and move and feel and people in your life have to die off so that you can get a stronger circle of friends and a stronger sense of purpose and a stronger sense of mission and a better way of feeding yourself, you know?
Wow. You got a consistent mindset on this, man. I could tell you've been studying this and being involved in this for a very, very long time.
Yeah,
Because
man.
these same thoughts, these same exercises, these same kind of beliefs that I'm learning and I'm trying to execute, you know, as we speak. You spot on, man. I definitely
And
appreciate your realness on this, man, and
absolutely.
expressing yourself on this because it's pretty impactful, man. It's pretty impactful.
You know, you asked me one of the ways to find out about nutrition and health, or just to find out about anything is you want to ask people who you don't even think you should ask. Ask
Yeah.
a kid how to make money. Ask a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
Ask a 10-year-old. What's the key to happiness? How to
Hmm.
live long. And then ask somebody around your age and ask somebody 20 years older than you. But
Don't
you
question
have
the obvious.
yeah. You
Yeah.
have to be willing to pull from different resources
Hmm.
to form an idea of your own, you know. And but at some point, there's a point where you have to put your head down, close the door, and get to work, right? Like I'm
Yes,
not
sir.
saying stay in this seeking question that every journey has to end
Hmm.
and you rest and you take what you've learned and you share it, right?
Hmm.
You consume and then you share lots of knowledge. But when you are on that journey, just know that there is no one teacher or guru
Absolutely.
or mentor. You know, you have to branch out a little.
I know who I'm coming to. I know who
Well,
I'm coming to, and I need that education, that self help, man.
yeah, man, and I
Definitely,
coach
definitely.
people. I
Yeah.
have a, you know, if you
Yes.
go to
Let's talk about that real
thrivewithleo.com.
quick. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
So
aware.
you know, you go to thrivewithleo.com if you want
Hmm.
one-on-one coaching with yours truly.
Yes,
And
sir.
what I'm there to do is manage your emotions
Hmm.
and cope with life and learn how to
Hmm.
take care of yourself. And it's not some, you know, like it's not the woo-woo stuff of like you
Yeah,
just got to work hard and show up. Like these are
yeah,
actionable steps. These are
yeah.
things that I've been through. These are things
Hmm.
that I've lived. And you know, like I said, you know, like I said, I've my depth has been, you know, calling the 800 suicide number
Hmm.
and you know, I've been balled up crying
Hmm.
and feeling lonely and like a burden. And so,
Sure.
and I know that there's so many people who, and you'd be surprised at how many people who we think are really thriving that are really struggling and need
Hmm.
someone to talk to and not judge them and to
Hmm.
help them not just with themselves, but to build better relationships with the people in their life.
Absolutely. I think that's key, man. I think one of the things that you kind of mentioned a little bit as far as is showing up and being educated on it, man, is one of the biggest things, man. Because a lot of people, they don't like to seek help if they're not comfortable.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So definitely, and one of the key things about you is you have to go through it in order to preach it, right?
You
So.
absolutely. And
Hmm.
because if the thing is like a great player doesn't always make a great coach,
Hmm.
right? And like Michael Jordan would not be a great coach because it came a little too easy for him. There it
Yeah.
wasn't. Yeah. He tells that story about the coach who didn't let him on the team,
Yeah. Yeah.
but outside of that, right? Like,
Yeah.
so you want somebody who really struggle because then they know all the ins and outs and they understand. Like people talk about Kobe Bryant and his struggle with being a leader was the struggle that had of motivation. So he didn't
Hmm.
understand why players weren't putting in the work that he was putting in. But I
Yep.
understand that. Like I get
Yeah.
not wanting to get out of bed, and I
Yeah.
understand like sometimes a shower is the hardest part of the
Part
day.
of the day.
So, so
Boy,
the
that's funny.
person at the top is not always the person you want coaching you. You want the person who has hit a bottom and pull themselves up so that they know what you're feeling and understand and can validate you and are there for you when you stumble a couple times, and it's something that we all need, whether we know we need it or not.
Hmm. Man, we hit some key points, man. We definitely hit some key points, and that's kind of what I wanted to really focus on this episode is just exercising mental health, man. I mean, it's really one of those things where, like, I'm working on every day, and not only do I think that this is going to be beneficial to me, beneficial to anyone listening to it, and that's kind of the whole idea of bringing you on today, man. And I definitely think that I'll be utilizing that website, reaching out and diving deeper into what is it going to really take. You know what I mean? Because I think a lot of people get lost on, like, what does it really take? Because there's so many different avenues, there's so many different resources. People get tied up and they just give up. So you know I think finding somebody that you can obviously relate with, or that you're comfortable with, that's the start, I feel like. Correct me if
I,
I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, you're so right, because it's
Yeah.
not just about, my mom always said, "A- a- anybody can learn or a teacher." And
Mm,
it is so true. It's about finding the right person that you match up with, that you feel
mhm,
comfortable with, and
mhm,
that there's this connection and bond and understanding, so that
mm.
you're inspired to do the work.
Man, that's amazing. So let me ask you this, man. We could about wrapping it up here, and I'm just curious. Obviously, we're in quarantine mode. There's only so much we could do right now, right? And I'm curious. I mean, obviously, you got a lot of ventures, you got a lot of things going on. Very successful at the things that you do, which I'm inspired by. A comedian first, right?
I'm comedian,
Comedian first,
podcaster, and life
po-
coach.
podcast,
It
life
all,
coach,
yes,
the man,
sir.
the man of all trades, or the jack of all trades, to say the
It,
least. But so
yeah,
what?
and you know what? And sound like three different things, but it
Hmm.
all ties into my mission to help a billion people. Because even through my stand up, I'm talking
Hmm.
about mental health, and I'm talking about my
Yeah.
journey. And so many people come up to me after shows crying, saying
Hmm.
that how much they related to what I talked about, and grown men. These are grown men
Yeah.
crying in my arms, and when there's a line of other people,
Wow.
and so there's so many people out there wanting to connect and reach out and seek help. And so whether I'm podcasting, whether I'm doing stand up, whether I'm coaching, they all
Hmm.
line up with the single value of reaching out and helping a billion people. So
Well,
it, it's
add me to that
it's
list. Add me to that billion.
I
Might
love it.
not
I love it,
might not
man.
be
Thank
much,
you
but
so much.
add me to that list, man. Definitely
Hey,
appreciate what you do, man. And I guess what's really next for you, man? I mean, obviously, we're in the quarantine mode now. I mean, as far as um I guess touching more folks and spreading kind of your word. What's next for you in that plan? I mean, you got the life coaching, you do the stand up, and you also got the podcast. I mean, do you have anything else in mind that you would like to share?
so I have a couple things in mind. I have a list called, because the name of my podcast is called Before You Kill Yourself, and,
Yep.
and I have a list of things to do called Before You Kill Yourself, because like I
Mm-hmm.
said, I still struggle with suicidal ideation, and
Mm-hmm.
part of suicidality, what people don't realize, that in the part that's really not taught, also have bad short-term memories. So it's very easy to forget all the things that you have to be grateful for, and
Mm-hmm.
all the things that give you hope, and all the anchors in your life. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's why it's so valuable to me and so important to me to do the podcast as a
Yeah.
reminder of what I'm doing and the impact that I have. And
Mm-hmm.
also why I keep a list of my phone call before you kill yourself, so
Mm-hmm.
that I have things written down that I want to do
Okay.
before I kill myself. With the idea being
Yeah,
that
yeah.
I'll never complete them all. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
That's dope.
I'm close to one. I want to visit all 7 continents. So we
Okay.
we knocked out 5, and if this quarantine lasts forever, then I'll never cross off
You'll never
the
hit that.
last 2.
You never
Yeah,
hit that goal.
but
Man. Hey, 5 out of 7. That's a lot of people can't say that.
we have Australia and Antarctica left. So
Oh,
actually, I
oh,
should be looking at tickets to
oh,
Antarctica. It's probably like $20 or
oh,
something like
yeah.
that
Oh yeah.
to
You
get
get to you
there.
get to Hawaii for buy one get one, twenty
Yeah,
dollars.
yeah, yeah. So
You know it's
I
bad when
forgot what you asked.
they got buy one get one
Yeah,
for flights.
especially for Hawaii. You know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
like, wow, that used to be like in the thousands, and now they
Normal
just want
normal day.
anybody. Yeah. I forgot the question you asked me though. There was what's next
What's
on the
next?
list? Is
Yeah. What's next?
so with the podcast before you kill yourself, we're
Mhm.
gonna take those episodes and make them into a book. So all the nuggets and the quotes and stuff like that, that's gonna
Mhm.
become a book. And I have some other
Dope.
ideas revolving around that, but I want to expand that brand into some other things. And so I'm super excited about that. And
So right
so
now, so
stay
right
tuned for
now,
that one.
right now, the podcast is like it's the biggest focus right now
The
for you.
the podcast and the coaching, those are 2 main things while we have this quarantine. And of course, I'm getting a lot of material, from
Yeah,
this quarantine, but I'm not putting too much weight on it, just
yeah,
because at some point people are gonna be tired of the quarantine jokes.
man, already
Uh,
tired.
yeah,
It's only
already tired of it. Yeah.
8:12, and it's already exhausted, bro. Like, I was like, man, there's so many songs and
Yeah.
skits. It's like, man, I can't even keep up no more. Like, it's so saturated, boy. It's like, no way.
Yeah, so I think once we get out of this quarantine, I think it's gonna be the thing
Look,
that nobody wants to talk about
this is
after.
what you do. You talk about it, but you got to brainstorm on how to come up with the most creative way to talk about it without even talking. You know what I mean? Like you gotta
Right,
change the
right,
game.
right.
Almost even talk about it without even saying. Yeah, what you need to call it is the Rona. That's
The
that's
ro-
that's they're
well,
calling it
it's
the Rona.
kind of like with Trump. It's to a point where you realize you can't say his name anymore. You have to be like the government or the people in charge. Like you have to
Yeah,
kind of dance around it.
the man in the blue
So
suit.
yeah, man in a blue suit. You have to. The 45th. Was he for? I think it's 45th or 46th or whatever. Whatever it is. Yeah, yeah. You
Somewhere.
have to. You have to be creative. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to switch it up, man. You got to come at a different direction. You go straight for the coronavirus. They gonna be like, here we go. Here.
Here we go. Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm telling you, I'm a consumer, bro. I've been consuming for a very long time. From Def Jam to Kings of Comedy to all that. Like I know the ways. Know the
Yeah.
ways. So you could take it for a grain of salt, or you could throw it in the back dumpster. But no, I think you got it, bro. But I appreciate you. Where can the people find you, man? Where are you active? I mean, obviously you got your Instagram, right?
So
What
yeah,
what what
I
platforms?
Instagram Leo Flowers 2000. If you go to Twitter, it's a shame that I have different names for different platforms. But if you IG, I'm most active on IG, Leo Flowers 2000. I'm also on Facebook. I post a little bit on there too.
Okay.
That's under Leo Flowers. And then Twitter, Leo Flowers for real. I'm the least active on Twitter. But if you go to my
Okay.
website, leoflowers.com, it
Mm-hmm.
links to all where I post
Okay.
clips
So
and
that's
things like
easy,
that on
easy
my
way to
YouTube.
get
Yeah, Leo
to all your
Flowers. That's the easy
platforms.
way. Yeah.
I
So
love it.
leoflowers.com is the easiest way. And then YouTube, Leo. And then for the one-on-one coaching, thrivewithleo.com.
Man, I love it. Get to it.
Thank you.
Leo Flowers, let me ask you real quick. So the Leo Flowers
Yes,
2000,
sir.
was that inspired by Andre 2000?
It was.
Or
It
Andre
was inspired
3000, but
by
I'm gonna
Andre.
drop I'm gonna
Yeah,
drop a
yeah.
thousand.
Yeah, because I wanted that Leo Flowers, and somebody snatched that up real quick, and so I was like, 3,000 sounds weird. 1,000 doesn't. It's something strong about 2,000. So I said Leo Flowers 2,000, and it's like I want to be in my head is more like 2.0. Like like an upgraded version, but you can't do 2.0. So 2,000. Was
You just started to that one.
yeah.
I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, man, that was a great episode. Sound On with Hollywood Hagan. Had a very special guest with us here today, Leo Flowers. He was able to, impact me. Hopefully he can impact everyone else. He said he wants 1 billion. Let's get him to 1 billion.
I appreciate you.
Thank you again for stopping by, man.
Thank you, brother. Peace.
That DNA test, 23andMe. So I'm not lying when I say this. They give you real detailed information about yourself. They tell you what flavor ice cream you like, right? They tell you if you can smell asparagus in your urine. They even tell you what you're gonna die from. Yeah, I'm gonna die from type 2 diabetes. No, this is great. Now I'm walking through bad neighborhoods. Throwing up gang signs. I'm talking back to cops. Do you know why I pulled you over? On a flight over, there was some turbulence. People were like, ah, ah, ah. I was like, guys. Type 2 diabetes. We're all going home today.